Good morning. My name is Hale. I'm a land surveyor in Nelson County. I'm also a bird watcher, and I've been watching birds for almost 60 years, and every year I learn more about birds. So what I want to talk to you this morning about is how to how to become a bird watcher if you're interested, and how much you can learn from watching birds. So one of the first things you need to do is to learn how to identify the birds that you're seeing. And what you need for that is what is called a field guide. There are many different types of field guides. This one was first published, back when I started birding a long time ago. And the key feature of field guides is that they have a plate, a picture of the birds on one side. On the other side, they have a name of the bird and a description, and then they have a little map which shows you where you can find these birds. All sorts of birds of different kinds. Now, these days you have many choices. The National Geographic Society has birds of eastern North America. All of them have the same idea. And then you look through these books and get an idea of they are. So most of you probably know what a woodpecker is. Well, they have a section that shows all the different woodpeckers. This one here, for instance, is the pileated woodpecker, which lives here in the Piedmont of Virginia. It's our largest woodpecker and makes a very jungle-like noise. My favorite all along has been Roger Torrey Peterson's Field Guide to the Birds. There again, it's that same woodpecker I was talking about. So you need to have one of these field guides and look through it and become familiar with the different families, everything from ducks all the way to our tiniest little birds, warblers and vireos and so forth. So any of these field guides work very well. Another thing you could get is a book which tells you a list of all the birds that are found in Virginia and where you might be able to see them. Now, the most expensive part of bird watching, of course, is binoculars. And because birds are often high up in a tree or a distance away from you on the ground, you need to have binoculars in order to see them better. And you need to have a binocular that is at least 8 times magnification. That's an 8 or a 10. And then the other number is the diameter of the objective lens, and you need to have an 8 by 40 or a 10 by 50 or something like that. So binoculars can be very expensive, but you can get a very adequate pair at a fairly reasonable price, and it's a lifetime investment. The other thing you can have is a list of the birds that you would find in Virginia, so you can check off ones you can see. Now, I always carry with me a little notebook so that if I go out bird watching, I have a list. Here I happen to open up one. I was at Ocracoke on the Outer Banks in July of 2020, the only trip I made in 2020. And then I have a list of all the birds that I saw there so that I can remember them. Now, what we're going to do now is first I'm going to say, I bet all of you know certain birds. How about the cardinal? Everybody knows the cardinal. It's bright red, and it's a resident of Virginia, and it's our state bird. Another bird that we have that has come into the Piedmont during my years of birding is our national bird. And I'll give you a hint as to the name of the national bird. You can look at my head, and that may give you a hint. It's the bald eagle. And the bald eagle is not really bald like I am, but has white feathers. But anyway, so the bald eagle now can be seen on our rivers. It has been recorded nesting in Albemarle County and Nelson County, and it is a bird that eats fish, and almost exclusively. So you'll see it along the water. So probably most of you know that. Now, before we walk around, I'm going to tell you one more thing about birding, and that is that most birds that we have around here, you hear them before you see them, particularly in the summertime when the trees are full of leaves and so forth. So I'm going to give you an example of one, and it's very hard to describe a bird song. But these days, a tool that everybody seems to have, which didn't exist when I was starting birding, is a cell phone. And with a cell phone, you can get several apps that are free. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has one called Merlin, and it has every bird, a picture of it, its song, a map, all of this sort of thing. So we're going to listen to one here to see what we think about this and see if you've ever heard this bird before. Now that sounds pretty wild. So that bird happens to be a barred owl, B-A-R-R-E-D owl, and you can sometimes hear them in the daytime. Most owls you can only hear at night, but you'll hear that bird. Now some people have said, well, you can describe that sound we just listened to as this: who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? And that's what it sort of sounds like. Woo, 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 woo. Woo, 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 woo. So now, the next time you hear that, you'll know what it is. So we're going to just walk around this garden a little bit and see what else we can hear as we walk around. So, and see if we see anything moving. So we'll wander down this way.
Mr. Hale, you said that the bald eagle eats primarily fish. What type of birds would you classify that eat, fish or meats versus birds that might only eat vegetation?
Okay, well that's a good question. There are most of the birds that you find on the ocean or in the Chesapeake Bay. Those are fish eaters, as you would expect, because the bald eagle is one that they will see a fish and dive into the water. The osprey, another sometimes called the fish hawk, which migrates through our area, and they're strictly fish eating. All these terns, gulls, seabirds, they're mostly fish eaters. As far as meat eaters, the only group of prey of birds that are essentially meat eaters are hawks and falcons, and we have those here. We have the red-tailed hawk. It's a beautiful hawk, and it will eat rodents or rabbits and things of that sort. Some of them, we have red-shouldered hawk, very common here. It will eat lizards and snakes, broad-winged hawks. So all of those birds of prey, hawks and falcons, some of them eat other birds like the sharp-shinned hawk or Cooper's hawk or the peregrine falcon, for instance. Most of our smaller birds, though, their diet is restricted to two types of food. One is fruit and seeds and that sort of thing, which brings up a very good point. If you're interested in learning more about birds, really how I got started is in the winter time, in fall, starting the fall, you start putting out seeds. Sunflower seeds, very popular with birds, and that way they come to your bird feeder and you'll see them, and they eat seeds. The other type are insectivorous birds, and you may not think birds are beneficial, but of course they're very beneficial to us. If we didn't have birds that ate insects, the insects would be eating us. So there are lots and lots of birds which eat insects. Some of them catch them on the wing. Some of them sit and watch and go up and catch them. Flycatchers do that. Warblers, vireos, blue jays. Some, like blue jays, they eat all sorts of things. But that's a good way to learn birds, is to see what they're eating, because eating, in fact, is what drives most of what they're doing. So, and if you have another question, feel free to ask it. And I don't know how our time is doing, but anyway. So, so you look around, and of course, to get good lighting is helpful. And you can see, now I hear a bird singing back over this way. So let's go over this way and see if we can find it. So as we get into these trees, you might be able to hear this little, it's kind of a series of chips. There it is. Now that gives you a clue to the name of this bird. Now we could stand here for a long time and might not be able to see it, but I know exactly what that bird is just because of its song. It's the Chipping Sparrow, and it's a little sparrow, and sometimes you can see it on the ground, and it has a little rufous reddish cap, small bird, and that bird goes away, by the way, in our winter time, and we don't have them. That's another thing of great interest about birds, is that most species we have are migratory birds, and that means they travel great distances. Many of you may have seen hummingbirds. We have a hummingbird here, and people put out hummingbird feeders, and they drink a nectar made of sugar and water, and what they normally feed on, flower nectar. And that little bird, a tiny hummingbird, flies all the way to Mexico and Central America every winter, and yet they can come back and come right to your feeder the exact same place, something that we couldn't do if we had to. I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment. And most of the birds that we have here in the summer are what they call neotropical birds, and that means they spend their winters in the American tropics, and they come here during the nesting season. So that's a big part of it.
Okay, so from what I understand, if you're interested in birding, the first thing you should do is get yourself a field guide.
That's right.
And a nice pair of binoculars. Doesn't have to be the most expensive, but follow your guidelines with having an 8 or 10 foot power magnification, and then maybe 40 to 50 feet with objective lens. Okay. And then decide, you know, if you want to sit in your yard and watch. Maybe if you have a feeder, you could find a safe place to sit and just maybe watch the feeder for a while, or just walk around your yard with your binoculars. And don't forget your notepad to make some notes in case you can actually identify something right away.
That's right.
And walk around. Or if you're out on a hike with, you know, a group or your parents, you're out on a hike, maybe have your binoculars, your notepad, and watch for birds there. But definitely watch the trees, watch on the ground. Sometimes we'll have one that'll just show up and just sit on the ground and eat some bugs, such as this little guy that I just caught there behind us. But find find a place that you're comfortable with your notepad, your binoculars, sit, watch, and listen.
That is exactly right.
Yes.
And there are also opportunities to go on bird walks. The Ivy Creek Natural Area has one at Wintergreen. They're bird walks. So a good way is to go with someone who knows the birds and will help show you what you can find. So I've enjoyed talking with you all this morning about this, and I hope you have great bird watching ahead of you. I've been watching birds for 60 years, and I've loved every bit of it. Thank you.